It's been said in the past by CA that something like 80% of Total War Warhammer players only play campaign. They don't touch the multiplayer. To me, this is a crying shame because multiplayer is really the best way to experience Total War battles. So this video will be my attempt to convince you to give multiplayer a try. Because I think there are a lot of players that do want to try out multiplayer, but they're maybe a little bit afraid or don't know where to start and find it a little bit overwhelming. So we're going to try and address all that, and this is mostly going to be done just through my opinions of Total War and what I'm looking for and what I was always looking for from Total War as a game and why I play the game the way I do now. And maybe some of you will relate. Anyway, enough rambling, here we go. So the prime reason I got into Total War, starting with the historical titles many years ago, is because I really enjoy military history and military strategy and military battles, the tales of Julius Caesar and Alexander the Great and Napoleon and how they used strategy to win the day, sometimes even when they were the underdog and they were supposed to lose. This is what really inspired me to ever play Total War in the first place. And I'm sure you are a little bit too. You've probably seen 300, right? A depiction of an old battle, the Battle of Thermopylae. Not quite as it probably really went down, as the film obviously is very exaggerated, and that noob Xerxes just spammed swordsmen against the 300, but they used strategy in a choke point to at least kill a hell of a lot of them. I think we can all respect a good old last stand story. So that's why I'm playing Total War, for the military strategy. To have an army that will require me to use strategy, not one that's just going to simply stomp the enemy super easily. I'm looking to engage my mind and use tactics and strategy. So what do I get if I play Total War Warhammer and I look for that? Well, if I play the AI like in a campaign, I get this. Completely disorganized armies that have no rhyme or reason. The AI very often just charges at you with no formation at all. They'll charge their units into terrible matchups and leave them there, like charging Dragon Princes into Chaos Halberds. They won't protect their missiles and artillery, so they're very easily taken out, very easily controlled. There is strategy there, but it's very easy to execute and there's very little resistance from the AI. Their units will attempt to chase units that they have no chance of catching, even miles away from the rest of the battle. They'll charge their lord into terrible situations and leave them there, pretty much handing you the lord's life on a silver platter. So you get the idea here, right? The battle AI isn't great. It can't really understand a situation and know what it's supposed to do. Which, once you get somewhat proficient at Total War, it becomes very easy to beat the AI in a kind of fair fight. The only way the AI can really present a challenge is if it outnumbers you or has some vastly superior army to yours, which will require you to use some strategy to defeat them. So all of that is what you get in campaign, facing the battle AI, which, don't get me wrong, I enjoy a campaign as much as the next man, but what I'm really searching for is those tough battles where I'm forced to use strategy and tactics to win the day. I'm not interested in hitting one button so I can auto-resolve and win. I'm not interested in spamming the strongest unit so that I can just run the enemy through with just right-clicking everything once and leaving it there. To me, that's not the essence of Total War and is ultimately incredibly boring for me. If you enjoy that, there's nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking people who like to play like that. But for me, it's not what I'm playing Total War for. I want to be able to use strategy. I want to be tested on my prowess as a military commander. In a video game, of course. But the other big problem I find with campaign is that factions really lose their identity. CA builds them and Games Workshop built them on the tabletop to have a certain faction identity, for the faction to play a certain way with certain strengths and weaknesses, certain playstyles, and that all completely goes out the window when you play campaign battles, because you can do whatever you want, there are no limits. You can build an army spamming 2 or 3 of the same kinds of units. They'll all be buffed to high heaven by Lord skill points as well. Which, don't get me wrong, can certainly be fun, and I see why people enjoy it. And hey, I enjoy a battle or two like that every now and again, but if you were to play a battle like this with just an army of Haganeth executioners, there's no identity of the Dark Elves there really, other than the units look like Dark Elf units. You could do the same thing with Black Orcs, or Swordmasters of Hoeth, or Chosen with great weapons. They're all basically the same unit, and if you play them this way and just bring a full stack of them, the faction identity is gone. It's just heavy armor piercing unit. Doesn't matter what the faction is, it functions the same on any faction you do that with. So you see, the faction identity kind of gets lost. Even though the Dark Elves have some strong armor piercing missiles, some good cavs, some good monsters, doesn't matter, all Haganeth boys. If you play Bretonnia and you only bring Hippogriff Knights that are flying, you kind of lose the essence of Bretonnia, having peasant infantry and then a bunch of strong cavalry. It's kind of gone out the window because all of your units are just strong flyers. The faction identity is kind of lost. If you play the High Elves with their strong archers and well organized army, but you bring 20 dragons, all strategy and kind of essence of the High Elves is lost, other than you're bringing the mythical beasts. But a bunch of other factions could bring similar builds, 20 Black Dragons, 20 Forest Dragons. Are you playing the High Elves, the Dark Elves, Wood Elves? Doesn't matter, they're all the same. You lose the faction identity. Or maybe you play Norska, a faction with some great infantry and great monsters, and you just spam 20 Mammoths. Well, that does sound kind of Norska, let's be honest. But still, you're missing a lot of good units, a lot of fun units to use, the Berserkers, the Skinwolves. All the different stuff that factions have to offer gets lost when you just spam one or two of the same kind of unit. So to me, faction identity getting lost is kind of a shame. Even though, it's war. All is fair in war, so whatever. But in terms of military strategy, I'm not going to get that if I spam 20 Mammoths. Although, technically I know if you spam 20 Mammoths, that's a strategy in itself. It's just the OP meta strategy, which to me isn't that fun. Which is why when I do play campaigns, I like to bring fairly balanced armies. And I get comments from people sometimes thinking that I don't know how to make campaign builds, but it's more that I don't want to build my army that way, catering to the game's mechanics and trying to exploit them. I'm trying to have my own Battle of the Five Armies, or my Battle of Helm's Deep. I want a fairly balanced army that I'm going to have to figure out how to adapt and use to beat whatever opponent may come up in front of me. That's why I build the army like it is designed for multiplayer. So yes, I'm making life harder for myself, but it's because I'm searching for those fun tactical battles. So that's just what I'm forced to do when playing campaign to get the experience I want from Total War. But even then, I'm still faced with the poor battle AI, which isn't the most fulfilling to fight. Enter multiplayer. This is where my issues with campaign can be rectified. I can fight someone who knows how to use a formation, who knows what matchups they should and shouldn't be in, who can adjust to make it a challenge for me, and the place where faction identity doesn't get completely destroyed, and where the diversity of the factions is really celebrated and needs to be paid attention to so that you can best build your army to deal with the threats. Facing someone in multiplayer is the closest I can get to really using tactics and strategy like all those military historical battles I so enjoy reading about. And it's in the Warhammer universe, even better. Facing another human comes with the benefits of someone knowing how to build an army, knowing what units to bring for their faction against the enemy faction that they're facing, what they need to do, what they shouldn't do, they know how to form up their army to protect itself and all work together, and it'll be a constant battle of trying to take the initiative and to gain the advantage, and of course to ultimately win the battle. People will make this a lot harder for you than the AI ever will. Of course, this is talking about when you're facing somebody who knows what they're doing. When you've got two players who both know how to play the game well, it's a real battle. If you have a newbie player against a much better player, then that's also going to be not very fun for both sides. It's going to be too easy for the better player and too hard and frustrating for the newer player. If you have two newer players fighting each other though, again you can have those real battles. People of similar skill levels can have good, fun battles. And the more battles you fight, the better you'll get and the better opponents you'll be able to face, until you can be at the top of the pile, which really isn't as hard as people think it is. To be really good at the game, it's mostly knowledge of faction and units. And of course, faction identity is all there. The High Elves can be strong using their missiles, but they are flexible. You don't have to bring missile-heavy armies. You could go for plenty of other game plans with the High Elves, and still you're kind of bending the faction identity, but it's not breaking it in the same way that campaign does. In campaign, you can buff Skaven slaves up to make them quite tough, which is kind of silly, because they're Skaven slaves. They should never be tough. That kind of thing can't happen in multiplayer. And then there's the other big fun part of it, the building of armies. There are certain rules if you have unit caps on that mean you can only bring certain amounts of units, and there are limits much more closer to tabletop, right to the tabletop experience, rather than campaign where there are no rules and you can do whatever you like. With multiplayer, you get that theory crafting of trying something and see if it works. Okay, I'm going to bring this unit, this unit, this unit. They're going to work together to do this against this certain enemy faction. You try it out. If it doesn't work, you adjust it until you find a build that works well to fight the faction that you're trying to defeat. That again is just one of the big fun parts of multiplayer. You do kind of get that in campaign, but not quite in the same way because of the lack of rules. So where do you start with multiplayer? Maybe you like the sound of this, maybe you want to give it a try getting the pure real essence of Total War battles in my opinion, and you think maybe it could be really something for you. Let me explain the multiplayer modes that we have at the moment. You currently got multiplayer battle on the main menu and quick battle. These are two very different modes. Multiplayer battle is where you can make a custom lobby. Anybody can make a game and you can set the rules. You can choose the map, you can choose how much funds there are, the unit sizes, how many players there are, whatever. It's all up to the person hosting. That's just kind of the mess about fun game, although they can be a bit dodgy with randoms if unit caps are turned off. So that's multiplayer battles. And then you also have the stupidly named quick battles, which should be called ranked battles, because that's what they actually are. You click find a match and it will find you an opponent. You'll then have to fight this match under a certain set of rules. You'll have to play on large funds, the map will be chosen for you, and unit caps will be turned on, and you have no choice about any of that. And you will be put on the ladder depending on how much you win or lose in those battles. One issue with the system though is that even if it's your first online multiplayer battle ever, you could get matched against a top 100 player. Which sounds really unfair, right? But it's because there's so few players playing that the game can't find you an opponent of your level. It will search for someone around your level first of all. If it doesn't find them, it widens the search. If it doesn't find anyone again, it'll widen it, potentially putting a newer player up against a top 100 player, which is going to be very frustrating for the newer player. The other issue with quick battles or ranked battles is that there is a fair amount of cheese. People using dirty strategies like corner camping to get those wins to rise up on the leaderboard for whatever reasons they may have. So, those two reasons alone are probably putting you off of multiplayer. You might get matched against a far superior player, and they might just cheese you anyway. So where do you go? Well, there's a whole bunch of decent Warhammer multiplayer communities out there, such as my Discord or a bunch of other YouTuber Discords. There's fan-made tournament Discords, all these places where you can find matches against people under rules who won't cheese you, and you can try and find somebody on your level to practice with. My Discord is linked in the description if you want to check it out. We have a bunch of different level players. We have some of our better players who are willing to teach newer players as well. So if you want to try out multiplayer for the first time in a non-toxic, friendly environment where people will help you if you lose as well or tell you what you did wrong, then do check out my Discord. I'm sure there's a bunch of other Total War creators who have similar Discords with a similar setup helping new players. So yeah, if you want to take your first steps into multiplayer, doing so in the game itself isn't that great. With quick battles, it's not a fantastic experience. CA hasn't made much of an effort with Warhammer multiplayer. Hopefully if we get more of a crowd for multiplayer in Warhammer 3, maybe they will make the effort. But for now, if you want to look to get into multiplayer, your best bet is looking at fan-made Discords and communities, because that's where the game can stay at its fairest. So why not give it a shot? I appreciate multiplayer is not going to be for everybody. Some people have absolutely no interest in that kind of competition, and that's fine. It is not for everybody. But I think there are, like I said, a lot of people who are thinking about it, but they're just a bit intimidated by the whole thing, because let's be honest, facing another human in one-on-one competition is very daunting, whether in a video game or in a real-life sport or something. It's far more daunting than if you're playing a team game with 10 or 20 other players on your team, because you've got other people to help you out or to blame if things go wrong. But when it's one-on-one, it's all you and only you. And that can be scary. Especially if people are toxic arseholes, that also puts you off as well, which is why learning in a friendly community is a great place to start. I often get comments of people saying, well, I've got 500 hours in campaign in Total War Warhammer, but I'm not sure if I'm ready for multiplayer. Do I need more practice? Do I need to learn more? The best option is just to get in there and do it. You're going to learn by doing with Total War multiplayer. I won't lie to you, there is a lot to learn if you really want to be good. There's a lot of knowledge that's required of the units, of the factions, and it does take a fair while in practice. But all you got to do is play battles, and you'll learn it without even really trying. Anyone can do it, it does just take a bit of commitment. It doesn't even take that long necessarily to get reasonably proficient. Once you learn how to form up an army, how to move them around the battlefield with micro controls, and learning some basic army building ideas, you can be well on your way. And you're going to mess up and make mistakes all the time. But guess what? So do the pro players, the ones that win tournaments. They mess up and make silly mistakes from time to time, just like everybody else. And if you practiced enough, you could be good enough to beat them. At least one day. It's not an unattainable goal. Or if that doesn't interest you and you're not that ambitious, you can just play other players around your level. And you can have plenty of fun, I'm sure, playing multiplayer battles, which are far more organized and tactical than the battle AI will ever give you. So why not give it a shot? Another thing I like to do when streaming on Twitch is if I get somebody in the comments who says they've never played a multiplayer battle before, I try to get them to have a multiplayer battle right there and then on stream in front of everybody watching. We will take their multiplayer virginity. We'll try to find them another newer player to face so it stays relatively fair, and they can break their fear of diving into multiplayer. So if you want to have your multiplayer virginity taken live on stream in front of 100 people or whatever, then feel free to come onto a stream and let me know that you want your virginity to be taken. Link in the description, of course. So there we go. That's why I enjoy multiplayer and why I think it is the best way to play Total War battles. Like I say, it's not for everyone, but I think you are missing out if you never really try playing other players, because it really is a different world to campaign. Let me know in the comments what you think about multiplayer in general and maybe whether you're going to try it out or not. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the future.